Well, hello, everybody. My name is Dave Palamar. This is part three of a five-part financial literacy curriculum. I surely hope this is valuable. I'm trying my best to give you some good information. So, like you all, I am a veteran and I've learned this material over my lengthy finance career, 30 plus years, and I just want to help people out. I surely didn't know any of this material when I was younger, and in case you don't, I'm trying my best to give you something to help. So that's a picture of me in front of an M1 Abrams tank. I was actually in the armor prior to that. We used M60A1s. Before I start, I do need to read this disclaimer. So this material, I know what I'm talking about. I'm offering this to you with the best intentions to advise you and assist you. I have gained this knowledge through my schooling and working in the financial markets for over 30 years. But this is a charitable offering. I will not be held liable for any inaccuracies contained or if anyone does something that I say and things don't work out the way they hoped. I'm trying my very best here. I teach this material as a volunteer, and I'm not purporting to have licensed expertise, although I do know what I'm talking about. So just some background here. Like all of you, I was in the service. I was in armor. My entire family was in the service. My mother and father. My father did not graduate high school. He worked in New York City subway for 37 years after World War II. My aunt, my three uncles, brother and brother-in-law, and I were all in the service. And I started the roots of my knowledge for financial literacy and the reason I try to help people is I grew up in a time period, and I don't know if it's taught these days, but it certainly was not taught back in the old days. I didn't know a thing about investments or budgeting or financial literacy or banking or credit or any of that kind of stuff. I did choose to go back to schooling, advanced schooling after the Army, and I borrowed the money to do it. I didn't get any free. My bill was much, much smaller than it is now. So I had a negative net worth until I was 36 years old. What a net worth means is it's your assets, what you own versus what you owe. And I owed more money than I had. So I had a negative net worth till I was 36. But I worked super hard. I did not put my hand out. I worked super hard. I paid off my loans, and I saved my money wisely. I've never wasted my money or spent it frivolously. I hope none of you are in that situation, but hopefully, if you are having some money challenges, these five blocks of financial literacy will help you. So the first session was an overall financial overview, which was kind of broad. And then we have four specific modules. Last week, we talked about banking and your relationship with the bank. This week, we're going to talk about credit. Upcoming, we have budgeting. And then finally, we have savings and investments. So credit. When we talk about credit, everybody has a credit score, whether you want to or not. The financial system, banks, financial organizations, they share data on you, and they share this data on you, and they put this information into into a financial system. I don't know how to describe it, such that there are records of your reliability in paying your bills, and paying back, paying your rent on time, and stuff like this. So sometimes people say, I don't care. I don't care about my credit score. I don't care what anybody thinks of me. Okay, it's not for me to tell you that. But when you go to get a job, the majority of jobs, besides basic jobs, and I'm not criticizing basic jobs, but jobs that pay more, the employer's going to run a credit score on you, and they're going to see, are you the kind of guy or girl who borrows money and does not pay it back, or that sort of thing. When you go to rent an apartment, buy a home, borrow money, They're going to run a credit check on you, and they're going to see how you have performed credit wise. I'll mention this later, but related to credit, related to your financial identity, is your credit score. There are three major credit agencies called Equifax, TransUnion, Experian. You can go online and you can access them. And I think the rules change from time to time. I think you can get a free credit report once a year from each of these. And then if you've had identity fraud, and you might ask, what is identity fraud? So, identity fraud is when someone takes your information and three critical pieces of information that you simply should not give out unless you absolutely have to in order to proceed. Like when you borrow money, you have to give them your social, but you should not give your social security number. You should be kind of careful with your birthday. Unfortunately, that probably gets out easier. It's kind of difficult to prevent. People want to buy you a birthday cake or sing happy birthday to you. Maybe you can give the date out, but not the year. And you should try to guard your mother's maiden name. As you might recognize, these three pieces of data, these are three pieces of data that you are frequently asked. You're asked anytime you want to borrow money or establish a financial relationship of almost any kind. Bank, insurance company, auto loan, mortgage, establish an account possibly with utility. Now, sometimes some of these organizations ask you for this information, and if you can believe it, maybe it's because the form that the person who is only doing their job, they're just following what they're told. They're an hourly employee doing what they're told. They're reading from the form. So if you go to the doctor or the dentist and they ask you what your social is, they don't need it. It might be on the form because back in 1975, they printed 100,000 forms and they still had 50,000 left, and it has Social Security on there. These days, they're not printing forms that ask for your social. So I'm being a little facetious, but actually I'm being serious. They don't need it. What they do need, they probably need your birthday. I don't think they need your mother's maiden name, but what they do need is the identification number and the group number of your medical plan, Blue Cross Blue Shield, whatever. You always have an ID number. They need that, of course. They need your birthday, they need the group plan, but they don't need your social, and they shouldn't need your mother's maiden name. However, if you go to borrow money, they're going to need that information. And you kind of want to be guarding about it. If you notice that the person has a headset on and they are on the phone with people and they're repeating and they're talking to Mr. or Mrs. Jones, and they're saying, okay, Mr. Jones, what's your birthday? And then they repeat it, and they're sitting in a lobby with 10 people in the waiting room who can all hear what he or she is saying. Say to them, hey, I'd like to write it down for you. Oh, by the way, take the piece of paper back after they transfer the information to their database. I'd like to write it down for you, rather than you to say it out loud, and say it in a nice way that you're not insulting them, but they shouldn't really have a problem with that. Just like when you go to the bank. If you're going to the bank and you're waiting online, and there's five people online with you, and you go up to the window, and the window probably has one of those plexiglass things, maybe not, blocking. Either way, you have to talk to the teller. You don't, and then he or she says, "Oh, how may I help you?" You say, "Well, I'd like to withdraw $200." Oh, $200, and they repeat it out loud. You might want to say quietly, not in a weird way, but I'd like to withdraw some money. I'm going to write it down for you. Just make sure you're not too weird about it, that they think you're writing a stick up note, but there's nothing wrong with doing that. And I think I said this last week, when you go to an ATM machine, when you enter your PIN into any kind of machine, even at the bank, just put your hand over it so only you can see it. Nobody behind you can see it. And just be careful with your information. But with your credit score, you can read these articles in any financial magazine, Kiplinger's, Fortune, Forbes, Money. Or you see them on the news. It's rampant these days, where people get your social security, your mother's maiden name and your birthday, and they take out a loan or they establish a cell phone account or any other kind of thing. They steal your medical records, and maybe they'll apply for some sort of reimbursement, or and then you'll go to get reimbursed, and they say we already paid you for that. Well, it wasn't you; it was the person who stole the information. So you have to guard the information. Identity fraud is very serious, and you should contact either Equifax, TransUnion, or Experian. Um, and again, the rules change, but I think you can have each of the three of them. You can get your credit report. And by the way, I'm going to advance this to the next slide. Experian. Okay, so I don't mean to go through those quickly. These are sample credit reports. So you get your credit report from preferably all three credit agencies. And you look at the list of entries on these reports, where they say you live and this and that. And you make sure it's accurate. If there's an address on there that is not yours and you've never lived there, your antenna should go up. If there's an account on there, let's go to this page, some bank or some financial institution. Say you had, I don't know, Best Buy or something. I'm not sure, and you had like it lists an account with Best Buy where you owe $2,500 for buying a large screen TV, but you don't go to Best Buy and you didn't buy a large screen TV. That means somebody stole your identity and bought that. And that's not Best Buy's fault. They didn't do anything wrong. The person had your information. Um, and I mentioned this last week too. When you go to a restaurant and you buy dinner, if, you and your friend, you and your spouse, you and your kids, before you sign or when you sign the credit card slip, they're supposed to take the credit card and look at the signature and see if it matches. I can't, I wouldn't imagine anybody's had that recently. Well, it's really the same thing. So whether it's done over the phone, whether it's done online, whether it's done in person or whatever, it's just not that difficult. It's illegal, but it's not that difficult for people to take your information and to borrow money or to conduct a financial transaction using your identity. So what you want to do is you want to safeguard your identity. In addition to that, if you're not planning on borrowing any money, it's not a bad idea to go online and to freeze your credit. I think you have to freeze it with all three agencies, but freeze your credit. Why do you do that? Well, you can unfreeze it easily, but this way, nobody, even if you can get the money back, because it's really difficult and it's really lengthy, but you typically are able to reclaim your identity and to undo the damage and to have the money refunded to you or the outlays canceled. It takes a ton of work. It takes a ton of time. So it's better to just avoid it, not to mention the um, discomfort, the violation of knowing that someone has your identity and they're doing this and that. In fact, identity fraud is not just somebody, stealing your wallet and doing these things. This is actually systematic. Organized crime does it. You've had, I'm an older guy, so I'm not super computer savvy, but I'm quite educated in preventing, issues. You'll get these texts or emails and saying, you've won this free prize, or maybe you're a customer of Walgreens. Click on the link and you're eligible for a $50 coupon. What they're doing, I guess that's called phishing, and they're trying to install something on your computer that will search for information. There's just all kinds of horrible things that can be done. So you want to be really, really secure with your information as very best as you can. So freezing your credit is one way to do it, and monitoring your credit scores or your credit report to make sure that there's nothing on there that's not yours. And being secure with your information, you must shred your documents. You cannot throw out statements. Guess what? Even when you get one of them free solicitations from a bank or some financial institution, oh, you qualify, for a new credit line. Just sign here and we will send you a new credit card and you get $50 at your favorite restaurant. That could very well be true. They might give you a credit line with $3,000 and $50 towards your favorite restaurant. And you say no. And you just tear it in half and throw it in your garbage pail. As ridiculous as it sounds, somebody outside your home, your apartment, whatever, might be going through your garbage and they might see your number and your information, and they might actually contact the institution and say, well, I've moved, but I really love that credit card and all that kind of thing. So all in all, you just want to be super careful with this information. Like I said, the data that you're giving people, you want to shred your documents. You want to guard your information. You want to review your credit situation at all times. Okay. So, and I think I said this, your social security number, very few places need it unless you're borrowing money from them. Be careful what data you give people, and monitor your credit and freeze it if need be. So let's go to the slide. Your credit score is called your FICO score. I actually don't know what FICO stands for, but there's the 5 C's. When they're evaluating your credit score, and everybody gets one, and you'll get emails from time to time. Oh, your credit score has changed, this and that. Again, we don't want to click on links and things that we don't know. We also, by the way, know that email and texts are not the least bit secure. It's public. So don't be writing your credit card number or any sensitive information on there, because hackers, I mean, even unsophisticated ones, can basically see anything. So you want your credit score to be as high as it can be, because if you have a lower credit score, when you go to borrow money, because you're going to buy a house or an apartment, or even take out a loan for a car, or call up the cable company and become a customer or whatever, or utility. If you have a stinky credit score, they're either going to charge you more, a surcharge, because your credit score is low, or they might even actually choose not to do business with you. They have that right. Now, there's accusations of companies that treat different people very, very unfairly, horribly, because of race or something awful like this. That is illegal and horrible, but they have the right to differentiate if you have a bad credit score. So some of the things, we call them the 5 C's, that go into your credit score. Your character. How long have you used credit for? So even for your adult children, you want to let them start getting a credit identity, which is a history, hopefully a really good one, of borrowing and paying money back. For example, you don't want to have 6 or 7 credit cards. Maybe you're the kind of person who sees a credit card offering, open your credit, spend $2,000, get free, 100,000 points and dinners and stuff. And you open it, you spend the $3,000, then you get the free stuff, then you close the account and go to the next company. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing illegal about that. But that actually that adversely impacts your credit score. Whether or not you agree with it, it does. They just don't like people who jump from thing to thing like that. How long have you used your credit? How long do you have a steady income? What's your personal income versus debt ratio? Are you the kind of person who earns 50 grand but owes 300,000 and stuff like that? And you've changed jobs 3 times in the last 2 years. Related to this is your capacity, your ability to take on new debt. Again, if you earn $50,000 a year and you owe $300,000, I'm just going to take a guess that probably wouldn't be easy for you to borrow money. Capital, how much money do you currently have that you could put? Now, of course, you borrow money. So you say, well, why do I have to answer that question? Because if I had the money, I wouldn't borrow it. Well, maybe I have the money for a 20% down payment. There's probably not too many people who could just readily go buy a house for $300,000, but maybe, do you have the 20%, or are you going to try to do it with 5%? Collateral, So there's things called secured versus unsecured borrowing. Secured, it's secured by an asset. This has bearing on, well, typically, for example, if you buy a house, if you don't pay off the loan, the bank will repossess it. And then, what conditions are there, which unfortunately you probably don't control. Current rates, interest rates, the higher they are, the more you have to pay when you borrow. They like that because they're earning money, but that makes it tough for you because your monthly payment is higher. If there's lots of people borrowing or not too many people borrowing, this has bearing on their willingness and eagerness to have new customers or available money because they only have a certain amount of money and the availability of funds to be lent. So other factors that affect your credit score. Have you paid regularly? Are you typically late? How often? How late are you? One day, 1 month? The best way to do it is don't be late. And I think we talked about this in the banking section that when I talk to you about banking and we talk about budgeting the next session, that it's good to have a bank account, whether or not you like banks and whether or not you think they're a bunch of bums. It's good to have a bank account and to have automatic payments such that every paycheck you invest for your future. Also, you might want to have your monthly payment schedule such that it's automatically paid to whoever you like your auto payment or something so that you don't have to write the check this way in case you're traveling. I mean, you might forget, maybe you had a baby and the baby came early and you couldn't do your bills for a week or so. Make your life easy, set it up automatically. How much do you currently owe? Let's look at all your credit cards, which hopefully you only have a couple. Maybe you have one Visa, one American Express. Who knows? Um, this my note here from my notes is it's better to keep your borrowed amount under 50% of the line. So if you have a credit card, you probably know this that your credit card says he or she can borrow a max of $2,000 or $8,000. Well, it's best to keep the borrowed amount under 50%. I'll go further than that. And we talked about this last week in banking, and we'll talk about it continuously. When you borrow money to buy a house, you can deduct the interest. You can't do that with a credit card balance. In addition, you don't owe 3%. Not that owing 3% on the balance would be a good thing. You owe more like 15, 16%, which is a horrible thing. You don't ever want to owe a credit card balance. You should borrow money for two things. I'm not your dad. I'm just giving you some advice. And I'm giving you advice from somebody who grew up in a house when I was 11, 10, 11, 12 years old. We lived paycheck to paycheck for a period of time. Maybe you did too. I hope not, but that stinks. That makes you really sober about being overextended financially. So you should borrow money for two reasons. And using a credit card is borrowing money. There's only two reasons. One is for education. By the way, it should be solid education and you should get the very best grades you can. If you go to a stinky school and get stinky grades, you sort of wasted your time. And the other thing you can borrow money for is a place to live, but it should be within your means. It should be a place you can afford. It should be a place that you can afford the expenses and the mortgage payments. Not that you're, paycheck to paycheck or just scratching to try to try to pay it. Some people say, "Oh, let me put down 5%, then I'll buy this piece of property and I'll get a tenant, and the tenant's payments will basically pay for my investment and it'll grow. And by the time we get done paying off the loan and the tenant has done that for me the whole time, I'll own this piece of property." That's a real good idea until the tenant leaves. You can't find a tenant or he or she does not pay the monthly payment, in which case you got to take them to court. And good luck with that. It could take 3 to 6 months, and the court, depending on where you live, might not even be willing to evict them. This is just reality. I'm not questioning the logic of the investment, but putting down 25%, if you can afford it, is a lot less risky than putting down 5%. But bottom line is, you should only borrow money for two reasons. So the next bullet here is the length of your credit history. Again, if you have an adult child who's no longer a child, 18, 19, 20, you might want to let them get their own credit card because you've been teaching them throughout their entire teen years that credit is awesome, and borrowing money and credit cards are awesome as long as you pay them off full in each month. How long is your credit history? New credit. Are you in financial trouble? How much credit have you applied for recently? If you've applied for 3 or 4 credit cards, now I will tell you this. I call them the dark years. Back in the years when I was poor, I had to apply for credit cards because I simply did not have the money. My credit score went to the cellar, but I ended up paying off all those debts, and I lived within my means, and I paid everything off, and my credit score recovered. That's the good thing about your credit score; it can recover. The type of credit that you've used, credit cards, loans, this is subjective. Have you borrowed responsibly, and wisely? So your financial reputation, know, you control it? I don't know. You can influence it. You can influence it, like I said, by maybe you have one Visa, one American Express card. You don't have like 8 or 9 of them just because you get free points for one and you pay the balance off of the other one and you roll the balance and then you draw from the other card to pay off the first card. That's not shenanigans. It doesn't make you a bad guy or girl, but it does adversely affect what the financial community thinks of you, and maybe you don't care what they think of you, but you greatly care if they're going to charge you extra to borrow money or not even lend you money because they think you are particularly risky. Excuse me. Any legal judgments or bankruptcies? Well, legal judgment, I mean, I guess, there's been a proceeding such that you owe somebody money or you reneged on something or there was some sort of judgment where you're liable for a certain sort of thing. Bankruptcies. I mean, these things are like, there's a long list. We can't exactly go down the list, but those things would have bearing. Legal judgments, bankruptcies. Okay, I guess that's the same thing. Impact on renting or buying an apartment, applying for a job, cost of borrowing. So I think I kind of said that. If you go to rent an apartment, buy or a home, buy an apartment or a house, apply for a job, or borrow money of any sort, your credit score will have bearing on your ability to even do that or to do that at the stated rate or at some higher rate because they think you're higher risk. And that's just how it is. Um, and I will talk to people and I teach financial literacy. And sometimes I go places and people say, oh, screw the banks and bunch of jerks and this and that. And they're doing this and that. It's like, yeah, I know, but I can't change that. That is how they do it. Banks and financial firms share information on you. Good debt. I said this, a place to live if it's within your means, and schooling. Bad debt. Um, Bad debt is like you say, my credit card limit is $2,000 and I only owe 100 on my current bill. So number one, the minimum payment is $10. I'm just going to pay $10. I'll let the 90 roll to the next month. That's bad debt. It's bad debt because it's not 90 next month. It grows. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 95, maybe it's 105. Who cares? It grows. And it just grows and it doesn't go away. Um, Loans, line of or bad debt is anything that, like I said, except for a home or for education. And when you owe money, when you owe credit card money, you should live within your means. I mean, if you can't afford the vacation with cash or that you saved up for, if you can't pay the credit card bill off each month, by definition, the amount that you owe is going to increase each month. And it's going to grow percentage, 12, 13, 14, 15%. And it's just going to get out of hand. And one day you're going to retire, or one day you're going to try to buy a house, or you're going to try to help your kids. And you're just going to borrow. You're just going to owe too much that you're going to be underwater and your debts will exceed your assets. You don't want to be like that. Um, Line of credit or loans, the characteristics. It's the rate, it's the percentage that you're charged, it's the term, for how long. Um, Prepay. Are you allowed to prepay, or is there some sort of fee for you to prepay? Grace period. That's the period beyond which, when the payment is due, that they'll give you another couple days before they start charging you interest and late fees. Late fees, they charge that to you when you're late making the payment. Step up risk. So sometimes someone will say, geez, I'm going to borrow this money and it's no interest for 6 months. That's really cool. And you borrowed the money for 6 months, but you didn't pay it back. And all of a sudden they say you owe 12% at 6 months and a day. That's when you're in a pickle, because the 0%, I frankly wouldn't do it. But if you did it and paid it back, I mean, I don't like to gamble. I guess I'm not a gambler. I'm very conservative. And plus, I told you, I've had a negative net worth. I've been poor as an adult. Being poor is something you never forget. You might forget your first home run, or you might remember it, but you don't ever forget being poor. Going to the store, having no money in your pocket, getting bills, not being able to pay them, or deciding which one you're going to pay or which one you're going to delay on, being invited out to go out with people and you can't go because the only way you can go is if you borrow more money to do it. You're sliding down a very bad slope. So watch out for things that are promotional or teaser rates. If you're going to borrow money or get a credit card or get a loan, be clear on what it can step up to, what the rate can step up to. And here's another thing: some people borrow on a floating rate. So you can borrow for your home, a 15-year fix, 30-year fix, whatever it might be, or you can borrow against an index. I think LIBOR is phasing out, but Sophie, I think, there's a new index. I forget what it is, or T-bills, or any kind of index that moves. So the bank or the lender might say to you, well, now I could lend to you at 5%, or I could lend to you at T-bills with an index. T-bills plus 1%, which is currently like 1 point something. And you say, wow, that's a pretty good rate. It is a pretty good rate until the Federal Reserve raises short end rates and T-bills go to 3% or more. And all of a sudden it becomes a pretty high rate and your payments go up each month and all this kind of stuff. There's a ton of varieties. Just be clear on what you're borrowing. ID fraud. I think I've kind of went through this pretty thoroughly here, but be really guarded with your information. What information you give and who you give it to. You really shouldn't give your mother's maiden name to like anybody unless it's a bank, and make sure they safeguard it. I mean, I hope it would never happen, but could you imagine if you were at the bank and you filled out the piece of paper, or the bank officer, he or she fills out the piece of paper, and then you say, I have to use the bathroom real quick. And then you come back and they're not sitting there, but your information is sitting there. And maybe they're talking to their friend John or Jane around the corner, and your information was sitting on that desk in public, in full view of anybody. Don't Just be really careful. Treat it as serious as it is. Be really careful over your information. Ask for pieces of paper back. Shred it. Be careful with your credit card. Block numbers and pins when you enter things. Shred documents. I think I've said this over here. Agencies, you can monitor your credit and freeze your credit. So if anyone has any questions, I will try my best to answer them. But otherwise, that is that. I guess Forrest Gump. That's all I got to say about that. So thank you for your attention. I tried my very best to help you. I hope you found it useful. Have a great day, and thank you for your service.